Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Louise Helbig. I'm the Executive Director of I-10. We're a nonprofit organization that has been in the St. Louis region for over 10 years, and we help tech startups take their product ideas from idea stage through market entry and hopefully to growth and scaling. Very happy to be here today at this fabulous event. I hope all of you are having a really good time. Very active and participatory crowds, so happy to see all your faces here today. I actually have the easy job, which is being the facilitator of the Smart City panel. So I'd like to introduce my subject matter experts, and I'm very grateful that they're here with us today. On the left is George Percival. He is the CTO and Chief Engineer of Open Geospatial Consortium. In the middle is Robert Gaskill Clemens, the CTO of the City of St. Louis. And finally is Martin McGreal, co-founder of Numina. So what we're going to do today in this panel is I'm going to start off and ask a few questions just to get the conversation started, maybe get your thought process started, and then we're going to open it up to questions. The panel had told me that they'd much prefer to answer audience questions than just talk about what they think and know. But what we do know is that when we were getting ready for this panel and had our pre-meeting is that there's really a lot of different definitions out there for smart city. And even our own panelists kind of said, well, they have their own different definitions too. So we have up here a very simple kind of general definition of smart city and some component parts of that. But what we're going to do today is let them talk about what they know and their areas of expertise and experience, and then, as I said, move on to the Q&A session. So what I'd like to do is let our panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves before we get started. So George, if you could kick us off, that would be great. Is your mic on, George?
Got the button. How about that? Hey, all right. First challenge, right? So thanks for the introduction. Yes, I'm George Percival. I'm with the Open Geospatial Consortium. OGC is an international standards, not-for-profit consortium focused on geospatial data, exchange, formats, APIs, data models, all of that kind of stuff. So, for example, you saw the Vricon presentation included a couple of standards, and the other one, the cesium one, is also coming along. If you're watching that, it'll be interesting. I3S and Web 3D tiles competition coming up here. So why are we here? Those 3D standards give you a really good sense of cities, right? Cities are spatial entities. It's where the population density is high. It's where clusters of things happen. It's where innovation is higher because of that close network connectivity. Everything we know about geography, the things closest to you really matter more in cities. So all of that has been an emphasis within OGC and our 525 members for a couple of years now, 4 or 5 years now. And so we saw smart cities as an area in which our standards, our technology, our members are really contributing. And so we got ahead of that. We're involved in the international standards organizations. We're also involved in the innovations of running code in cities, making things work. For example, with St. Louis, developed a really good partnership with the city of St. Louis. And so that's why OGC here and why I'm here. So thanks.
Thank you. Robert?
All right. Robert Gaskill Clemens. I'm the first Chief Technology Officer for the City of St. Louis. I've been around for about 6 months now. My role, the city's whole Smart City initiative, falls right in the center of my plate. But it's also taking a look at how the city and community onboards new technology. And it also includes other things like what we're doing with startups and small businesses, what we're doing to grow the technology workforce, and things we can do in the area of research.
Martin?
Hi, I'm Martin McGreal. I founded a company called Numina. We make sensors for streets that measure pedestrian, bicyclist, and vehicle traffic, or really any visible object that you'd like to measure. They're a fixed sensor system mounted on like street lights and traffic signal poles. and we are deployed in a number of cities across the country. Right now, we are manufacturing our Gen 2 sensor, and we just deployed it in downtown Brooklyn. And so I come from a sensor background, but we also work with cities in understanding how to actually process that data and what kind of changes are needed in a more holistic sense to enable a smart city vision.
Martin, can you start us off and share your definition of smart city and what outcomes you would expect?
So, to me, smart city is really a process where you make a city more responsive to better feedback. And that means actually being able to receive feedback, whether it's from ICT type systems or from the users of government services and citizens at large. So that's a transformational activity. And really, anytime you talk about transformational activities, you need to talk about change management. We believe strongly in the change management process, which is about helping people understand how change impacts them, preparing for change in terms of process changes, investment in employees, probably most importantly, and I've heard Robert talk about this a lot, talking about training the workforce, and I think that's wonderful. And yeah, so that's what smart city means to me. It's really more about just IoT and feedback from sensors, but mostly about getting feedback from people as well and being able to process that.
Any specific outcomes that you look for?
Well, I mean, I think that the slide pretty much nails it. It's improving the quality of life and being responsive to change. Mm-hmm. You know, change is one of the studies have shown that actually change is increasing for businesses, municipalities. You know, I hear them talking about this morning with the NGA as well. Like the NGA director was asked, "How are you guys coping with change?" And his answer included, you know, it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. And you know, we want to move people up the stack. You know, we don't want to talk about like automation, like spreading fear, but rather displacing people upward, as he said. You know, like getting people to focus more on producing deliverable decision-making output rather than just collecting data and massaging it. You know, rather than spending 80% of your time collecting documentation and imagery and massaging that into some deliverable, spend 80% of your time actually focused on the decisions that need to be made rather than just handing it up the ladder.
Okay. Robert?
Okay, what is the definition of a smart city? That is a loaded question. So the way I define a smart city is one that's willing to embrace innovation in order to improve the quality of life of the citizens and the business environment. Now, that means a lot of things. I know when a lot of people think about smart cities, they think about technology. In my definition, I would say it's just as much about business process. It's just as much about all the things you see up on that slide, which may or may not include the deployment of new technology. A smart city is also one that, through the innovation climate, has communities and various ecosystems that are willing to actually start talking to each other and come up with the definition that's even more important, and that's how does the city of St. Louis define being a smart city?
Okay.
I was the other end of the debate, and I'm the technology guy, right? So my view is technology brings us things that we could never have envisioned, and they produce opportunities that we couldn't have if we didn't have that technology. Yes, we want to meet the goals of the citizens, the leaders of the city and the like, but how we got here with respect to smart cities was a convergence of really three critical areas of technology coming together. One is modeling of the city, right? The ability to really create interactive 3D semantic-based models in a way that can be shared, that can be interrogated, that can be used. So having a model of the city was key. The inputs to that then, the sensing, the IoT sensing, the sensors that you guys build are amazing. The mobile phones that we walk around with now give us all kinds of data. The imagery from above, the imagery from street level, any kind of awareness that we have of our city gets us to that definition of smart. So smart means you're aware of your environment. Smart means you've got a model of your environment, and smart means that you're able to make decisions, informed decisions about what your city should do. A lot of the emphasis in smart cities initially in the decision-making area was about command and control. It was about, how is your emergency operations center going to be able to operate quickly based upon all that input? A very good use case, not the only use case. The community participation, gathering data from citizens, able to give you input in real time with their mobile devices so the city leaders can make informed decisions, so that the individuals can make informed decisions based upon getting provided information in real time on their devices. Those are the things that make a city smart from a technology point of view.
Okay, so I think you've kind of started in this direction. Would you also add for us what you think some of the biggest challenges are in moving toward a smart city deployment?
Yeah, sure. So the challenges in my mind are the ability for a city to manage that technology over time. And so we know there's going to be generations of technologies. We know there's going to be multiple vendors of technologies and the like. And every smart vendor will say, my solution works best. Plug into my device, use my API, don't look at anybody else, right? That's a smart vendor. I get it. Maybe not the best choice for a city. And so alternatively is the idea of open standards at interfaces that allow for plug and play of components of smart cities. We've talked about street cameras on occasion. If you're a city manager, you probably don't want to buy a TV camera system that doesn't allow that data to get out of that cloud that's provided by the TV camera vendor. Well, how do you enable those interfaces? How do you define that open architecture? How do you evolve the system over time, your city's IT structure over time, to me is the hard problem, and that's why I do what I do.
Okay. Robert?
Okay, 3 that I can think of for the city of St. Louis. One, the city does not have the basic infrastructure that's required to actually start deploying smart technology. For example, our streetlights are high voltage. They're fed by a 480 high voltage power grid that only has power from dusk till dawn. It's rather difficult to start deploying sensors and other technology when your streetlights don't have. Yeah, exactly. Another challenge is changing hearts and minds within city government and getting people to the point where they can understand how certain technology could have an impact on the way that they're doing business. Getting away from paper processes, things like that. And then the other challenge is naming that tune. I mean, one of the big conversations going on in city government right now is around data-driven decision making. Okay, what decisions? What data? What's the equation you're going to use to make those decisions? So it's challenging people to come up with those kinds of answers at the same time building the basic infrastructure the city needs in order to deploy smart city technology.
Martin, what do you see as the biggest challenges?
Well, yeah, just to tack on to what Robert is saying there about making sure that you actually have identifiable goals in mind, and actually Martine was talking about this as well, and Harrison. Whenever you're building out an analytics program, you don't want it to be a science experiment. You want to have hard, concrete goals that you're trying to deliver on. And that's starting typically, practical first step, identify processes that we already have in place that could be optimized, right? That could be automated. The CSB, St. Louis's 311 system is an ideal candidate right out the gate. It actually has a queryable API to get information about what requests have been submitted, but once they go in there, it's kind of a black hole. We don't know what status, if it's been assigned to anybody, when it's going to be resolved. But another major challenge is, I think, communication. You know, you will never experience a more siloed environment than City Hall, I think. It's a political machine by nature, so there are deliberate barriers to collaboration set up. You know, making sure that we can have processes in place for collaboration is essential. Understanding what a data-driven culture looks like. How do you make data-driven decisions? Well, you need to actually train people on how to think about data and use data and actually have a platform for using data. So I think communication, trust, and as Robert and George both spoke to, technology enablement is key.
Okay, Robert, I'm going to ask you, what about low-hanging fruit? Is there anything out there that presents a short-term, near-term opportunity that you see?
Actually, yeah, and interestingly enough, it's been around geospatial technology. Within the first few months I was here, we actually, Esri actually developed a new 3D base map for the city with the notion that we use this 3D base map to start understanding what's going on out in the community more easily, and then actually move that into a space where we're using that as sort of a digital twin to start interacting with what's going out in the city. You know, bring up a camera feed, look at readings off a particular sensor, what are pedestrian counts in a particular area, what's the status of infrastructure in a particular area. And then once we've gotten to the point where we can actually use this model to interact with things out there, be able to start advancing it towards planning. So just something as simple as getting simple, but just something like getting, a foundational piece like a three-dimensional base map of the city turned out to be low-hanging fruit that a lot of people would have thought would have been, that's 20 years out. They're like, well, no, we did it in 2 months. It's done. Moving on.
George, do you have any thoughts on low-hanging fruit?
Actually, on this one, I agree with Robert. 3D model as a base map of the city, that's what I usually... You got a GIS department in the back office. What they need now to do is a 3D base model. It's the new base map for your city. And, you can go back 5 years ago and say the grand challenge was to do urban modeling at scale. And, people like Vricon and others have, and a lot of others, have solved that in the sense of being able to quickly gather the data and create those models. Indoor and underground are the new frontiers, and how we do that is under study and development, innovation, and all the rest of it. But yeah, absolutely, the use of 3D maps for urban environments is low-hanging fruit. Everybody ought to build models and locate their sensors on. Yeah.
Martin, did you have thoughts?
Low-hanging fruit, I often think it's not as exciting to talk about as the technology aspect, but really just getting legislators, government service users, i.e. citizens, and technologists together in the same room when developing policy would make a huge difference in our service delivery. And that is the very beginning of the sort of culture of collaboration and technology enablement that we need to have started in order to realize a smart city vision.
Okay. I'm going to ask the panel one more question, and then we're going to turn it over to all of you for Q&A. So my final question for the panel is, are there any cities that you see that are doing things that are really interesting or groundbreaking? So whoever would like to take that.
Sure. St. Louis. So we are, and the other innovators that are as far-sighted as Robert. We are conducting some activities right now for Smart Cities. There'll be a hackathon here in T-Rex, November 2nd through 4th, focused on innovative solutions on some underlying data sets and some use cases and the like, coming from the city of St. Louis, coming from Virginia Beach is the other primary one. There's some other cities around the country, but those are the two key ones for that hackathon, November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th here at T-Rex. Sign up, be here.
All right. Robert? I know you've been doing huge research and exploring, and so it's
Yeah,
probably
I
a
mean,
loaded question for you.
It's interesting because more and more cities are starting to hire CTOs and counterparts, and we're talking, believe me, we're talking about opportunities, vendors, and what have you. However, as far as interesting things that I would want to model after, LA has a startup incubator that I personally believe is almost next to none. I mean, the city is actively engaged with all the incubators around, everything from selecting startups to engage in the program, partial funding in some cases. So that kind of city engagement with the
So
community.
it's actually the city's incubator. The city is running the incubator?
The city does not actually run it, but they have a leadership role in it.
Okay.
And, in my humble opinion, the city of St. Louis should be taking an active role in incubating startups and small businesses.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Nor could I. I love that answer. And so, I mean, as an entrepreneur, we went through that very problem of trying to engage with cities. And San Francisco had their sort of pioneering program, the Startup in Residence program, which we participated in, which enables a city to collaborate with startup companies while also minimizing risk to the city. Mm-hmm. The procurement process for municipalities is complicated, to say the least. And it can be really difficult for small companies to get in the door in City Hall. But programs like that, like what you're talking about, Robert, I mean, those are essential to adjusting the procurement process to enable that sort of technology adoption. And I also really love the hackathon that OGC is putting together, George. I think I was really excited to learn about that last week. It's a Smart City Hackathon. For those who don't know, it's happening in November. And it's going to be based around the open data portal that St. Louis already has up, which is also really wonderful. As far as what other cities are doing that I really like, Montreal has a program called Innocité MTL, which is it's a incubator specifically for civic technologies for Montreal, not just for Montreal, but incubated in Montreal. And New York has one called UrbanX, which we participated in, which is also really great. And I would love it if St. Louis could muster a program like that as well. I think it would be really great to bring civic tech companies into St. Louis to innovate on site. Especially because St. Louis is not like New York or San Francisco. We're a medium-sized company. I'm sorry, we're a medium-sized city. Mm-hmm. And we're a lot more like cities like Kansas City and Columbus and Pittsburgh and most of the cities in the country. So startups are much better served. We've always believed that we were much better served coming out of St. Louis than companies that we've seen come out of places like New York and San Francisco who really cater to those niche cases and can't replicate their success in other cities.
Working on it.
Thank you. Okay, so audience, it's your turn to ask questions of the panel. Anyone have a question? I have a microphone for you.
So how are you incorporating softer attributes like census data in interest of demographics in addition to these physical structures that you're seeing?
So we have a really involved relationship with, there's a part of the United Nations that's a statistics group. And coming out of that kind of demographic data and the like are some really good models and connection between GIS and statistics data. One particular aspect of that is how you do the binning of data and what's called discrete global grids and the like. And so OGC recently adopted a set of standards around discrete global grids that's specifically oriented towards census and other demographic data so that you can integrate from a lot of different places. So there's a lot of activity right now in statistics community, geographic statistics communities around discrete global grids. That's going to be heavy in cities. We also know that commercial vendors, Uber in particular, is taking that approach to location-based identification in cities based around discrete global grids most of them are hexagon-based for a bunch of technical reasons. But that grid system is really important to having statistics and GIS and analysis work together. So it's a techie answer to a social question, what'd you expect?
Any other questions?
And I can speak to that question just a little bit, although it may be slightly not what you asked, but we use crash data to understand where baseline measurements for bicyclist, pedestrian, and vehicle traffic align with crash data so that we can help cities prioritize safety measures. Because a lot of times, like in a city like Jacksonville, actually, where we worked, has the highest pedestrian fatality rate in the country because it's also the largest by land area, and they have beach, and they have a lot of tourists, and they have a high pedestrian fatality rate, but they don't know exactly, like at this intersection, if we had 3 people hurt, was that 3 out of 3, or was that 3 out of 3 million, right? So it's important to get that sort of information.
And what I can say, and what I can say is, we're in pursuit of open data standards that allow us to pull in information from a lot of different places. For one problem that we have, though, is with data like census tract data, the degree to which it's refreshed, it can, become stale to the point where we can't really base service delivery decisions on it because, we may have a high transient population or something like that. But one of the things we are targeting are deals with crowdsourced data producers and things like that. Like, for instance, we just entered into an information sharing agreement with a connected vehicles company, so we can start pulling in information they're collecting on their vehicles to understand traffic patterns. There's other crowdsourcing applications out there where people will report potholes or things like that. Pulling that in as another data point that we can use to help start steering the delivery of city services.
All of the data.
So that just went in perfectly to my question, which, as you're trying to develop a smart city from the get-go, how do you, from a process standpoint, try to identify bias that's associated with that build-out that becomes inherent in the system itself, and how do you then go about mitigating it?
You want to take that?
First question back at you would be, what exactly do you mean by bias?
Well, it could be anything from a socioeconomic status of how you decide to deploy a system. If you're looking at sensors or information inputs that are based on a particular technology that perhaps is not spread throughout your entire service area, how do you incorporate those sorts of dark spaces within your information cloud, so to speak?
Exactly. What I will say is that equity and the equitable deployment of technology is at the heart of our smart city strategy. One of the things that I insist on is, as we start to identify new technologies, even when it comes to how we're building out and modernizing infrastructure, if you're doing it in what I'll say maybe the more affluent areas, or if you're talking about like wireless deployment and things like that, the more profitable areas, you also have to be doing it in underserved areas at the same time and using a geographical approach to compel that. And then also just laying down the rule. If you're going to be deploying anything within the city of St. Louis, you're going to be doing it equitably. Or there's a price you're going to have to pay for not doing it equitably. Does that answer your question?
of requiring that those types of services be rolled out across the city, and I know you've been a big champion of that, and I really appreciate that. I think that it's also important to create personas for services. You know, apply human-centered design principles whenever you're talking about developing new services. Identify all the personas that would be utilizing this service and make sure that they are all being served. You know, in Florida, there was a rollout of a family assistance program that it put all the forms for assistance requests online, and suddenly there was an influx into libraries of people who didn't have access to computers. Like, particularly elderly people generally don't have cell phones, you know, and can't do that kind of stuff in order to participate. So that was a case of a lack of understanding of who their actual users were before making changes to the service.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. The notion of bias and analytics, and in particular in the context of geography. It's not a new question. I mean, I was going to say geography department in every college, but there's not many of those in any case. All the people that study geography, right, have wrestled with, and it's gotten worse in the sense of machine learning, deep learning analytics are impenetrable with respect to understanding how they've made the decision. We had a panel a couple weeks ago, Smart Cities. The person on the panel that really gave the best answer, and I'll repeat it in a second, was he used to be with the New York City data analytics office, and he's now Esri's head of urban data analytics or something like that. He said two things. One is openness of the algorithms, and he pointed to, in fact, in that case, New York City has passed a regulation, a law, whatever. Anytime an analytic algorithm is adopted in the city of New York, it has to be made open to its process. I don't know if that means the source, the algorithm, I don't really know. And in fact, they've got a study going on this year to roll that out for visibility, openness of algorithms that are used in New York City government. Very good pattern to follow. There's the references and everything on the line. The other point that he made is that of the teams that are developing the analytics, there should also be diversity and non-bias, or to reduce the bias based upon a diverse group of people developing those analytics. And to me, those were really two powerful messages as we move into more challenges about bias and analytics.
And just to dovetail off that, other things that the city's doing, for the longest time, the allocation and delivery of services was pretty much spread the peanut butter. So every ward got X amount of money for whatever. Whereas that's changing. Now it's the use of analytics to figure out, okay, where's the biggest need? And start driving the delivery of services to the need instead of just spreading the peanut butter.
Dick?
Got to ask Robert to extrapolate a little into the future. We've got, of course, a $1.75 billion major investment happening in an area of the city that's been disinvested for 75 years. We've got Northside and the Innovation District there, SLU doing an Innovation District. Obviously, Cortex has been very successful in theirs. If we were to emulate what Bob Bennett, your colleague, has done over maybe the last 5 or 6 years, and you're just getting started, where will we be in maximizing the civic and economic benefit of NGA in 2025 if you have your way?
Okay. Well, major investment like the one NGA is making is definitely an outcome, and the ability to attract that kind of investment is definitely an outcome of the Smart City Initiative. So if I were to fast forward, let's say 10 years, we'll take what Kansas City's done out of the mix. But if I were to fast forward 10 years, we would have a much more resilient and smart infrastructure. We would have public transportation options that are actually aligned to how the community wants to move. We would have a combination of technology and process to enhance public safety and the perception of public safety. So basically, we will have leveraged innovation and technology to create the kind of environment that would attract additional investment like the ones that NGA is making. Does that come close to answering that very loaded question?
I would just add to that that the NGA is going to experience a lot of the same challenges that a municipal government is going to face in developing a data-driven culture. And I think that they could really assist each other in collaborating on things like in terms of mentoring programs, training programs, cross-training with each other, doing sort of hackathons like what George's company is doing, and really sharing that knowledge between both the federal and the local government, because in terms of data culture, I think that government organizations face unique challenges in terms of collaborating through those barriers.
So I grew up in Belleville, Illinois. And my first really strong memory of St. Louis in terms of social strife was Pruitt-Igoe, which of course is close to or on the same spot and the like. It was a housing development that essentially went, it was smart cities in the 60s with systems thinking that was not effective, right? And so in some way, we've got those same challenges now. You know, I made a whole big deal about how it's all about technology. It really is about the people in the end. I'm playing a role, man. And so, you know, what do we do in smart cities that avoids those kinds of aspects is what I would take away from your question. Kansas City in particular took an approach, to my understanding, focused on a corridor, in particular about tourism in a corridor and building up that area. And so that kind of incremental approach has been successful for them, and so might be something to mimic and the like. There's a lot of different strategies in that regard about smart cities and, you know, public-private partnerships and the like. A lot of good experience in venues that talk about smart cities, you know, for a week at end, that I think we're learning things that will lead us to smart cities that are human-focused with results that make a difference for the people that live there.
Any other questions from the audience? No? Any other thoughts you gentlemen would like to add before we wrap up?
This might even be building on your last question, but you know, we need to be in this for the long game. I know NGA is in it for the long game with an investment like that. And building out a smart city capability is not going to happen overnight, you know. This is going to, nobody has all the answers, and we need to acknowledge that and make some short-term goals and some long-term goals, establish values, and iterate. It's going to take 10 years or more in order to fully realize this kind of vision. And I think that once we understand that and we settle in and not look for the sort of big bang panacea sort of solution, we'll be just fine.
And I'll dovetail off of that. You know, the Smart City Initiative that's now underway and several of the programs that I'm actually about to announce in probably 3 weeks or so, it's disruptive. It's extremely disruptive. It's disruptive to the way city government has always worked. It's disruptive to how community organizations have communicated with each other in the past, if at all. So I will say, and to St. Louis's credit, that there's been a large degree of embracing that disruption. But at the end of the day, there will be a whiplash effect. And, you know, much like Martin said, it's not going to happen overnight, but that's no excuse to not make it happen and not push as hard as we can and get it done as quickly as we can.
All right. One final call for one final question. Going once, going twice. Okay. Martin, George, Robert, thank you very much for being on the panel today, and we thank all of you for spending time with us this afternoon and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.